Christ Triumphant for September 5th. The reading is entitled, My House Shall Be Called a House of Prayer. Matthew 21, verse 12. And Jesus went into the temple of God, and cast out all them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves. The temple courts were filled with cattle, sheep, oxen, and doves. Above the noise of the lowing of cattle, the bleating of the sheep, and the cooing of the doves, could be heard the voice of the traffickers, as they offered for sale the animals and birds at the highest rates to those who had come to the Passover to offer sacrifice. Jesus said, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. This act on the part of Christ was deeply significant, more significant than any of the beholders realized. When the priests and Pharisees had recovered from the terror that had taken possession of their guilty souls at the words of Christ, they returned to the temple. They were not converted or even humbled. They determined to challenge Christ as to his authority for expelling them from the temple courts. When they reached the temple, they found that a wonderful work had been done during their absence. The sick and dying had been restored to health. They were astonished, but they would not yield their stubborn unbelief. They had already determined to put Christ to death, and Lazarus also, who had been raised from the dead. They knew that the people would still believe in Christ as long as there lived among them one who had been raised from the dead by his power. The evidence Christ had given was calculated to convince every sincere mind, but it was not evidence that these people wanted. It was the rejection and condemnation of Christ by the people for which they were seeking. Every additional evidence given only increased their aversion. Every additional evidence given only increased their aversion to Christ. To have Christ in the world performing his wonderful works, to have him live before the people his life of goodness and self-denial and self-sacrifice, to have him exercise for others the tender compassion that had long since departed from their lives, was the very thing they did not want. Christ was fulfilling the commission given him of his Father. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord hath anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He hath sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison for them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. Thank you for listening.